You might be a bit confused by the title, as am I, because it's tough to come up with something, because obviously last week's video is sort of a preview of what's coming later this week, so I'm sort of caught in limbo. Plus we're in the post-Thanksgiving sort of stuff. But thankfully, reviews for a certain game started coming out Monday morning, afternoon, evening, depending where you are in the world. And it made me realise that once again we're going to have another year of hype not matching reality. Case in point, well, let's look through all the releases that have... I haven't got a complete list here because some of them are in different sections, but we'll go through it gradually. Because I feel that a majority of games, through various different issues, whether it be technical or whether it be actual game-based, have come to realise that, or have come to form that this year really isn't that good of a year in gaming, possibly reflected by the fact that quite a lot of interesting games are missing from each other's Game of the Year awards lists, if you remember, that I covered last week. Certainly from the Game Awards one. They only sort of list the winner. They don't properly list the whole top three. At least on Wikipedia for the Game of the Year, even though there was probably like a list of about 30 to pick from. But just looking through my list, first one that stands out as bucking my trend is Unravel. It's clearly supposed to be a small game and delivered in the sense that it's a small game with a lot of heart, and I think that's been forgotten about and underrated. Street Fighter V. There's your first one. Possibly the console exclusivity screwed it over. Possibly because the key stuff that people were looking for in terms of content didn't get added until an update later on. Possibly because the esports scene is divided over some of the content from it. Then Far Cry Primal seemed intriguing, and then people just realised it was really just a reskin of Far Cry 3 and 4 combined. Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2, great fun thing that decided to have microtransactions because EA told them to. Tom Clancy's The Division seemed brilliant, and then when we got to it, this open world sort of craziness felt very repetitive and churning. Hitman. See, that is now actually getting probably the credit it actually deserves now that all the 6 parts have come out. But in its episodic format, I can see why they did it, but at the same time, I'm seeing playthroughs happening now of people playing through the entire thing, and it just fits a lot better. When you get an episodic like RPG, like your Batman, the Telltale series, or your Walking Deads, or your Life is Strange's, that works. It fits because that's a style of structure that fits to an episodic sort of nature. An action sort of strategy game like Hitman really doesn't seem the perfect choice for that. But now that the full game's out, it actually seems like a much better thing, which makes you wonder why it wasn't brought out like that. Adrift, the big demo from a few years back, which was like the Gravity the game, where you were stranded in space with all the stuff floating about. Turns out that's all it basically is for about 2 hours. which is alright for a cinema experience, but as an interactive experience, is it really what we're looking for? Dark Souls, something that actually delivered. You will get a gist of the story. You know, it's going to be dark, it's going to be sinister, the gameplay's good, just all that sort of stuff. We got one in the actual, okay, hype did meet reality in that sense. Doom, to another extent, actually had a lot of hype. To some extent, I feel that it's not the actual game we should be blaming for that, it's the developer in Bethesda, which is a key factor as to when we get to later for a few things, if I haven't already talked about it in previous stuff. There are a lot of hype behind Doom, although no press copies given out, and you know, it turned out it was still a good game. The thing is, though, we know Bethesda have done a lot of problems in the past. You know, Rage wasn't very well received at the time. Prey was so good, it never came out and is now getting re-released. Or reworked, rather than re-released. And is now called Prey. So if you've got the original version of the game on PC, that's going to be really confusing. Homefront: The Revolution. Everybody was like, oh... Well, actually, with that one, the hype was interesting, but then it was such a buggy mess, which, considering the fact that that game has been through about 3 developers since the closure of THQ, there was a worrying sign there. Battleborn. A lot of hype behind that for Gearbox, and it really sort of hasn't delivered. You know, player base is struggling. People have a problem with its identity because of something that did deliver on the hype, probably because it was Blizzard, in Overwatch. Mirror's Edge Catalyst, another game people were excited for, and then found out that really it was sort of lacking in terms of less repetitive gameplay, because that's what sort of they were promising from the original, and a story which I would say the original story is slightly better to some extent. Mighty Number 9. You know, the fact that Kickstarter people felt a little bit cheated by stuff that happened, I think that says everything. Witcher 3's Blood and Wine DLC. Oh wait, that's a good one. That had good story, good gameplay, and delivered. Hence why some people want to include it as part of Game of the Year, even though it's only sort of DLC. That's already came out last year. No Man's Sky. I don't need to say anything, do I? Deus Ex Mankind Divided. A really good game, but just in the story terms, a lot of people were feeling the story towards the end goes a little bit wrong for quite a few people. Not enough to really change the fact that it's, you know, a good game or a bad game. It still is very good, but it's just some people did feel that the ending was a little bit sort of shoehorned in and out the blue, sort of as if there was still stuff there to come. Elder Scrolls Skyrim Definitive Edition. And there was everybody was or remastered edition or whatever it's called. The fact that you can release a game 5 years on from original release and still have bugs that were in the original one that got patched out of the original one says quite a bit. And even if we go to the console exclusives, Quantum Break, sort of had all the promise of being really good, and sort of got buried under the fact of the whole TV episodes really ruining people's immersion. Ratchet and Clank, I have to say, personally, I haven't played the game yet, but I think it's somewhat delivered. I am hesitant on it myself, because the movie, it's like, the movie was okay, and from what I can tell, the game is actually pretty good. But of course, because I'm from the era that actually played the original one, part of me just yearns to play the original one again. I have bought it, though, on the PS4, so I'll be probably playing it over the next few months, once I get the PS4 hooked up again. Uncharted 4, I would say, on the whole, is one that delivered on the hype, despite all the issues that went through. Nothing else, at least in that essence. Nintendo, well, really anything on the Nintendo didn't deliver, because it seems like Nintendo doesn't give a damn about the Wii U anymore. Star Fox Zero, some people did like, some people really didn't. With the controls, I completely forgot that there was a Kirby game that came out. Mario Party 10 didn't fix the issues. Although I thought that was already out. Oh, it's because it's got amiibos. That's why it's in my list for releases. I'm an idiot. One that probably did deliver, again, was sticking with Nintendo, actually delivering, would be Pokemon Sun and Moon. That actually seems to have done pretty well. Certainly sold well, and the reviews seem to be overall pretty damn positive on it. I can't say they were essential sort of things, but it seems like the right direction. Why isn't that in that list? Right, there's a game that I forgot to put in there. XCOM 2. That had, at least on the PC, quite a few issues that probably stopped it from being great, at least at launch. From what I've heard, it seems like the problems have now been fixed. So, oh no, wait, did XCOM 2 come out for consoles yet, or is it not? Wow, I'm even doubting myself in my head. Wow. Don't mind me, I've lost my shit. Super hot. And that's the thing with some of these PC ones, and probably more often than not indies. Like your Stardew Valleys and whatever. A simple premise, and it delivers. Super Hot is a very novel concept for a game, so it works. Stardew Valley fits into that whole wanting for another Animal Crossing that isn't Animal Crossing, and probably is one of the sleeper hits of this year, arguably. Trying to think if there's been any other exclusives on the PC. Can't think of anything. Then again, there won't be a lot of stuff in my PC list, because if I did all releases on Steam, it'd be crap. But now I'm going to look through the more recent releases that aren't in that list. So, bear with me, I'm scrolling. Forza Horizon 3, I'd say that delivered. Really good game. The Dead Rising remastered, can't really classify that because it's sort of the original game, really. It's not that much different. XCOM is on consoles, so I've still got to add that in. Right. FIFA. On the FIFA Pro Evo stuff, both seem to actually deliver on their stuff. FIFA 17 with an actual interesting story mode, which I didn't think we needed in a football game, but it turns out, I can't say it's brilliant, but it's not bad. I was fearing it was going to be crap, but it's actually pretty decent. Mafia 3 has a really good story, but and I've seen it in many people's playthroughs, if they're trying to do like rackets and stuff, some of the buildings they walk into, even though they're 3 blocks apart, have exactly the same layout, and exactly the same staff, and exactly the same NPCs walking outside. So I feel that just goes against it. Paper Mario, one of the probably Nintendo ones that actually did deliver, but to some extent you have to say it didn't deliver because during the time it was launched, all the rumour was circulating about how the Wii U was dead and nobody was giving a crap about it anymore. Gears of War 4 had so much promise and overall is a pretty good story, but with that game, I feel that the problem that it has is the publicity, because nearly all the publicity that I saw building up to launch, including all the E3 stuff, was showing, oh, here's all the dark stuff. All the stuff like in the daytime, in the daylight, where you're not fighting against the Horde, which is an interesting story angle, they didn't show you until you actually got in the game, which to some extent was a nice surprise, but also that might have hooked even more people in, to some extent. PlayStation VR, there's a lot of good games on it. It's a pretty reasonable price. But it's just, most of those games just feel like short experience things that work in a party situation, and not like a long-term thing. You know, it doesn't feel like I've certainly seen with Oculus and HTC Vive, where you've got driving games, you know, American Truck Simulator, Dirt Rally, where, okay, you take your headset off from time to time, but every time you feel immersed in the thing, and you want a go again sort of thing. EVE Online, to some extent Alien Isolation, even though I haven't seen that working with VR properly. All that sort of stuff. You know, the Resident Evil 7 demo, aka Kitchen, or whatever the hell you want to call it. VR is pretty interesting, but it just feels that we're lacking that. I mean, it just feels we're lacking sort of that big AAA title to yet step in and deliver a quality VR game that is a worthwhile, somewhat lengthy experience, rather than just feels like it could have been stuck on a demo disc. Sorry, Until Dawn Rush of Blood, but it sort of does. Haven't seen hardly any reviews for Skylanders, so that says a lot. Nobody wants to review it. Battlefield 1. A good direction in terms of concept compared to the other one, but all in all, especially when you get to certain aspects of like multiplayer, it just feels like a Battlefield game. Civ 6, probably another one that delivered. I would argue There are a lot of good aspects for new and experienced players and everything. So I'd say overall that was okay. Again, I haven't seen any reviews for Just Dance, so that says a lot. Titanfall 2. You see, with this one, the hype delivered, but the problem with the hype was Titanfall 1. Because Titanfall 1 hurt Titanfall 2, I would argue. People were so excited for Titanfall 1, and then they found out, oh, it's online only. 2, there's no storyline, it's just multiplayer. And 3, both. Now, Titanfall 2 has medium, I wouldn't say short, but medium campaign, which is an interesting thing, and the gameplay, even with the zip wire thing, seems to be better with Titanfall 2. But because of the damage done by the Xbox One, Xbox and Windows exclusive thing, probably hurt it. World of Final Fantasy, actually, I would say delivered a lot more than, because I don't think anybody was expecting World of Final Fantasy to be good, and it turns out, oh wait, it actually is. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, very good single player, average as shit multiplayer. Football Manager, the fact that backlash for no support for Chinese in the thing was, I think, overblown, but also rather telling that the fan base wanted it, and they said that they'd listen and didn't deliver. So, Dishonored 2, again, a very good game, and certainly with the PC version, a lot of problems in getting to run properly. So, to some extent, I'd say that's what hurt it. But perhaps, because they said that sales were bad, perhaps they were waiting for it to get reduced. So, it'd be interesting to see where it came, whether it improved in terms of sales this past week, given that a lot of stores, certainly Amazon did it. I think Amazon was the cheapest, but a lot of stores had this, and Watch Dogs 2, we'll get to that in a minute, reduced by a few extra pounds or dollars or whatever. In terms of Watch Dogs 2, it's interesting that you go from a gritty sort of dark game to a much more light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek sort of satire in the second, which I feel will be lost on quite a lot of people. The Nintendo Classic Mini NES, or whatever you call it. The fact that the stock is so low and nobody can buy them probably until next year tells you that that didn't deliver. And then moving into Final Fantasy 15, where the early reviews, quite a lot of them seem to be saying the story really isn't that good, but the rest of the experience probably carries it through to being a very good game. Which is annoying to me, because I always feel the best parts of Final Fantasy 15 is where you feel invested in the story, and if the reports if the reports that I'm hearing seem to be true, and that the sort of bar the unit of 4 together, the interaction that they have with the rest of the story, the girl he's in love with Noctis is in love with, and whatever, that ties to the villain and everything, isn't that strong. I just feel a little bit of my inside just crack, because a I've lived through the days of Final Fantasy, hell, even 6. Okay, I haven't played it, I think, even though I've got it on PS1. I've lived through 6, 7, 8, and 9. What some people feel are the strongest ones in terms of story. I for some of the people that only started possibly from 11 onwards, it's not been really great, because 11 was online and was a broken mess. 12 was okay, but because it was released on certainly PS2, when most people were on PS3, I don't know how big that really was. 13 was very split down the middle on people. And 14, the original online version of 14, was really rubbish. And it was only till Realm Reborn came in and Heaven's Ward that we actually got a very good MMO from Square Enix. And even looking ahead to this coming week, this Friday sees the release of Steep, at least in the UK, which from the beta that I saw is like, yeah, that doesn't look very good at all. So I just feel that just looking at this, and it's truly a case of will we ever learn? Because looking at some of the games that got delayed, well, hell, we don't even know about Last Guardian. We'll have to see about that. Hopefully that is one that does deliver, because that's been a long time coming. Then again, so was Final Fantasy 15, and they tried to make that be not good, but it's probably held out in the end, hopefully. But, we've got Dead Rising 4. Considering some of the changes made to that they've tried to justify, some of the fans still won't be pleased with that. But South Park, that got delayed. There's a lot of people excited for that. Resident Evil 7. Persona 5. For Honor. Halo Wars. Horizon Zero Dawn. Ghost Recon Wildlands. Mass Effect. Dead Island 2, if that even happens. Hellblade, from the guys that did can't even remember. Can't remember the game. I know what it is off the top of my head, but I just can't think of it because I'm an idiot. All the PS4 things we saw: God of War, Spider-Man. Probably a new Halo towards the end of the year, just they haven't announced it. Final Fantasy 7 episodic. Scalebound, there's hell, the Nintendo Switch in itself, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and everything. There's a lot to be excited about. But after what happened this year with the majority of those things that we were excited about, I'm wondering, I'm hoping, and then realizing that I'm probably going to be disappointed.